Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Um, I'm Hossein from IPG campus, Pulau Pinang, and I'd like to extend a warm welcome to all of you for joining us on our webinar, which is entitled Writing and Publishing Research Articles. Let's chat. All right. Thank you for joining our webinar. And this webinar, for your information, is organized by our Prospan community of the Institute uh, Pendidikan Guru Campus Pulau Pinang. So, without further ado, I would like to introduce you to our panelist for today, who is Professor Dr. Chua Meng Kiat, and he is the Dean of the College of Science at the National Tsinghua University, Tsinghua in Taiwan. Okay, and so I'd like to welcome the professor to join us, Professor Chua. From what I know of him, the background I did, the professor has an extensive repertoire of journal publications, dating for many, many, many years. And so, without further ado, I'd like to call upon him to say something about himself and introduce himself. Professor Chua.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to participate in this event of IPG Penang campus. And before I start, I'd like to thank the invitation. I received the letter from the director, Dr. Asman. Thank you very much for inviting me. And for the past few weeks, I also have been very thankful with Dr. Kubili, the coordinator, for working very hard to make this possible, and she makes sure all the arrangement goes smoothly. So thank you, Dr. Kubili. And of course, today I'm very happy and thankful to Dr. Mat and Dr. Hussein for hosting this event and moderating this activity. Yeah, thank you, Dr. Mat and Dr. Hussein. And yes, I was born and grew up in Penang, Malaysia. I attended primary school in Union Institution and then Chongling High School. After that, I went to the United States for further studies. I got my bachelor's degree from Brandeis University and my PhD in mathematics from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology in the year 1993. And since then, I've been doing research in Taiwan from 1993 until now. So it's been 28 years that I'm in Taiwan. And actually, I feel very grateful to IPG for hosting this event because for all these years, I've been keeping in touch with Penang and visiting my family. And so I've been visiting home Penang from time to time. So, and I'm proud to be a Penang guide. So, yeah, by the way, as a Penang guide, I'm proud to read this book, by Dato Lee. And I hope that all our countrymen are doing well in Tokyo this year. Thank you.
Okay, Professor. Now, since you're going to talk about, publishing journal articles and writing and publishing and so on, the first thing I'd like to know is what motivates a person to write articles for journals?
So there are actually a lot of motivations. First of all, we have sponsorship from the government and the university for us to do research. And by doing research, we do have financial funding, and we also can travel abroad, and then with performance bonus for our salary, and of course our own sense of achievement. So I emphasize university incentive and government sponsorship because often a lot of people are not aware that pure academic research is actually not a money making business. It's for the goodness of the society, and the researcher himself or herself often does not rewarded directly from the research result. So we rely a lot on the government sponsorship. So many people understand that the government should spend money on public structure, for example, roads, bridges. And why would the government have money? Because they collect taxes. And for the same reason, we do deserve government support, because the researcher alone would not benefit financially from the research, and the research activity is conducted for the goodness of the society. And well, maybe I would give some famous examples. Say the most famous scientist of the 20th century, Einstein, with the most famous scientific equation E equals to mc squared. And for such a huge academic achievement, Professor Einstein is not going to benefit financially directly from the result. I mean, when you go home, your home appliances are not going to move as fast near the speed of light. So you're not going to need that equation. So we do need um, university and government sponsorship for very upstream research. And of course, the own sense of achievement should be there, because as a researcher, we do enjoy our work. Otherwise, we're not going to get very far if we don't feel interested and conduct scientific activities out of curiosity. So the own sense of achievement is also very important. Thank you.
Okay, Professor Chua, I'd like to ask you something here. You
Yes,
mentioned that the motivations for writing journal articles and
yes,
publishing them in journals are based on university incentives, government scholarships, and a sense of achievement, a personal sense of achievement, right? I'm
yes,
just
yes.
wondering, is there any incentive that comes from the publishers of the journals, like in monetary terms, for example? Do they pay people for writing articles?
I speak from mathematics. I don't know about other disciplines, but in many disciplines, including mathematics, the journals do not pay the author. If you submit to a magazine or newspaper, yes, but for pure academic journal, they don't provide financial reimbursement for our papers. So we rely. I mean, we rely on the government and the university for rewarding our scientific achievement. And so for myself, I mean, obviously from a day-to-day basis, I would continue the research work because I feel interested. But on the more long-term basis, I do research because it's appreciated not just by my colleagues and by the universities and the government. And I'm fortunate that I've been receiving some academic awards from Taiwan. I've been publishing for about 38 articles in mathematics since 1993, and I've earned a few academic awards from the Taiwanese government. And these actually, yeah, it's very satisfying experience. Yes,
Wow.
indeed, these are the awards that I win for the uh, in my career. Some academic award and outstanding research award for my journal publications and academic results.
Okay, Professor, that's quite an achievement. You've done a lot, I think. That's great. Now, I'm just wondering if one were to write articles for journals and so on, uh, where would the sources of the resource topics come from? Like, how would you decide what to write on, what to share, what to send to journals?
So first of all, we need to find a good source of research topic. So from my experience, either we base on our own work or we based on other people's work, or communicating with other scholars. I mean, first of all, the topic should be new and not done by somebody else. So if I continue with my own work that I just completed recently, then I'm quite sure that it has not been done, and I continue. Or I can look at the journals and find other people's result and communicate with them. For mathematics, it's very tough to look at others' work and try to understand. It takes a lot of effort. So it's very convenient, more convenient if we have the chance to talk with the authors themselves. So we would go to conferences, or after we read the papers, we would send email and exchange thoughts and get the perspectives from the authors themselves to speed things up. So that's sort of the way to find new topics.
Okay, Professor. I'm wondering,
Yes,
what good does it provide for the general population? Like, example, the readers of the journals. People who read these journal articles. Like,
yes.
what impact does it have on the consumers of your publications? Example, maybe teachers, students. I don't know.
Uh-huh.
Whoever else is interested. Yeah. How
Um,
does it impact them?
so I think a good paper has two aspects. When we write, I mean, obviously, the very motivation for writing a paper is out of scientific curiosity. And if it benefits the public, then that's the extra bonus. So good scientific works are done not directly by the desire to have um, impact on the public, but more motivated by scientific curiosity. And then, of course, what is a good work? That would be, of course, a good question. And I think a good paper has to strive for truth and beauty. And these are the two main aspects of a good paper. I don't know about other disciplines. I'm speaking mostly from mathematics. So a good mathematics paper aims for um, truth and beauty, meaning importance and interest. So if you have a result that has good application on the society, as you mentioned, that constitutes the truth part. Or if it has very good academic structure, then it would be a beauty. So, for example, um, at this point, if somebody comes up with a good cure for the COVID-19, it would be a very top paper anywhere in the world. So it helps the society. So that's the truth part.
True.
And a beauty part actually uh, plays very, very important role in mathematics research, especially pure mathematics. For example, somebody would get a top result in studying the distribution of prime numbers. uh, when the prime numbers get large, how does the prime numbers are distributed? That might not have immediate application on the society, but it has very high academic value. So that would be the beauty part. So truth and beauty are the two main parts of the good paper. And I guess I can compare, if you compare a mathematics paper with good food, perhaps, then what you seek for in good food would be healthy food and delicious food. So the truth part of the paper is comparable to the healthy or nutritious part of the food, and the beauty part would be the how delicious it is. And
The
obviously,
taste.
in the truth and beauty of the paper, truth is more objective. I mean, if you tell people you can cure COVID-19, then everybody knows it's a good result. And similarly, in good food, if you can say that your bowl of noodle has how many calories, how much protein, everybody would agree that it's healthy food. And the beauty part, it's relatively more subjective. So similarly, if you have a bowl of mee udang, somebody would say that Teluk Kumba has the best, and somebody would say Pulau Aman is very subjective. So it depends from people to people. And if you, in surprisingly, in pure mathematics, contrary to many people's thinking, beauty it's often more important than truth in the very top level of pure mathematics. So maybe it's same thing when you have food contests. Yeah, I mean the top award is given to the most delicious prawn noodle or nasi lemak, not so much the most nutritious one. So maybe that's a comparison.
That's a very good analogy, Professor. Yeah. And next, I'd like to ask you about you. You did mention the optimal difficulty level, right?
Yes,
Uh,
yes.
who decides what's the optimal level of difficulty, and who sets the standards for that? Like, how
So
do we
yes,
know?
So obviously, when we write a paper, we want the paper to be appreciated, and I mean, it has to be accepted by the journal editors. And one criteria is, of course, the level of difficulty. I mean, if the result can be achieved by many people easily, it's not likely to end up in the top journal. Whereas if the result shows that the author puts in a lot of effort and almost nobody else can do it, then it's very difficult paper of high level of difficulty. So it's likely to end in a top journal. And the level of difficulty is determined by the problem itself, not so much by the author. So when we look for research paper, um, we look for the ideal topic, ideal in the sense that the topic is as hard as possible and yet within the ability of the author. I mean, if it's too easy, then um, it's not appreciated. You get it solved in a few days, and the journal will not appreciate it. Or if it's too hard, then I mean the author cannot finish it, cannot get the result, so it's no good also. So ideally, we look for the paper that is as difficult as possible, and yet within the ability of the author. So I guess it's similar to when you ask for beef rendang in nasi kandar, you look for the one that's as spicy as possible and yet within your tolerance. If it's too bland, you feel it boring. And if it's too spicy, you can't handle it. So it's sort of a similar comparison, I guess.
So, what you're saying is that that decision comes from the writers of the articles and not the publishers.
That comes from the problem itself and the author. There are some difficult problems and there are easier problems. And the author looked for the ideal level of difficulty. Of course, it's also possible that when we start doing research, we don't know how hard it is. So it could be that we look for a problem and it turns out to be harder than we thought. And then we manage to solve a big chunk of it, not all, but and it still deserve to be published somewhere. So the level of difficulty of the problem is decided by the problem itself alone, as well as the author, in the sense that how much of the problem the author wants to solve it, not so much by the journal. So we look for a problem. Sometimes we don't know how hard it is. We have to try. If we try it and we can get it solved by 1 or 2 days, in an extreme case, then it's no good because it will be too easy. And if we work on it and we can't solve it at all, it's no good. So ideally, we solve all of it and we find it very difficult and it turns out to be um, barely solvable by myself, that would be good. So yeah, the choice of a good problem is actually a very important aspect of research.
Okay, Professor. Now, I've come across journal articles where you have like more than one author. Sometimes there are two, sometimes there are four, sometimes there are like five people writing one journal articles. So I believe that these are efforts of collaboration, right? Uh, what are your comments about collaboration when
Uh,
it comes to writing articles?
there is definitely advantage of collaborating. It makes the work more efficient. Uh, for mathematics, most of the time a paper is written by one or two or three people. Um, Very rarely the mathematics paper is written by more than four or five. I know in experimental science it's different. Sometimes in the big laboratory you have 10 people joining on a huge project. Everybody takes care of one part and then the main organizer fits it together. But for mathematics, the usual way it works is to have uh, at most three people, occasionally four. So for myself, all my papers are written by either myself or two people. Yeah, I currently have a project submitted, and it's three people. So I would say a very common part is to have one or two or three, and having collaborators make things more efficient. It also makes the research more fun, I would say, if we get along well with a collaborator. I mean, we exchange thoughts by email, and also sometimes there are things that I miss and my collaborator would remind me. And the fringe benefit of having collaborators is we get to travel. My university would sponsor me for traveling, and I'm fortunate to have a collaborator who works in Italy, and as a result I've been visiting Italy for the past several years. Visited four times, so I've been to Rome, Florence, Venice, Milan, and yeah, all those nice places. So taking my family along, so they also enjoy the trips to Italy. So it sort of makes the research process more fun by having collaborators.
Okay, Professor. Uh, does what do you call it? Having collaborators
Yes.
makes you to come up with research articles in a short time, as opposed to doing an individual work. What do you
Uh,
think?
Having collaborators would speed things up, yes, and there are different natures of collaboration. So my collaborator in Italy, it's the same age as myself, and we have similar experiences, and we do see different things from the same project, so we sort of
Mm,
complement each other. So we are like equal partners. And there are another type of collaborator. I used to have a postdoctoral researcher. He's younger than myself. Um, he's now in Nanjing, China. He's less experienced by myself, but because he's younger, he's more energetic. So when we have research problems, often I would look at the big picture, and he takes care of the final computation. So it's like I see the jungle and he sees the trees, and that's another form of collaboration. And the frequency of publication, yeah, usually we publish things a little faster with collaborations. Yeah.
okay, in a collaborative project, right?
Yes.
Uh, how do you go about doing it? Like who initiates, like, and who decides who the collaborators are?
Uh,
Is it the university or you just do your own?
mm, Actually, we do our own, regardless of the university's um, policy,
Mm.
and that's more efficient. And we come up with specific topics, and then we look at the internet and find out that okay, somebody happens to be an expert in this area, and the project requires several skills. So um, and the part of the problem that is I'm not so familiar with, I would look at the internet and find out, okay, this person is an expert in this area based on the publication of the past few years, and I would contact the person.
Mm.
So for my Italian collaborator, she contacted me by email saying that she has a problem, and uh, she knows part of it, and the other part she needs some combinatorial aspects, and she learns from my past work on this area, and she asked if I have any ideas, and then we started exchanging email, and then it works.
It
And
works.
also, there's other part where I have a postdoc, my collaborator in China now, and he comes to me as a postdoc, and then I would say, okay, you look at my past papers, and there's some part that requires computation. See if you're interested. And then I basically come up with a topic, and he's hardworking, and he would do the computation. So to answer your questions, different groups of collaborators have their own ways of running
How
things.
they do things. Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes.
Mhm. Okay, Professor. Now, let's say we've come up with an article. Whether it's
Yeah.
individual or it's done in by the means of collaboration, right?
Yes, yes.
How does one decide which journal publisher should be informed of this? Like how do we know where to send these articles?
Okay, so after we get the paper written, if things smoothly, we start to submit to a journal that is suitable for this paper. And usually there are two aspects to consider: whether the journal is suitable for this area, and whether the journal is too tough or too easy for this paper. So the area part is it's easier for me to answer because, for example, I have published a few papers in the Journal of Algebra because I've done some work in algebra. So obviously, when I write a paper in algebra, I do not submit it to Journal of Differential Equations. They're going to say that, well, it's not within the scope of this journal. So we need to get the journal of the suitable area, which is related to the paper. And some journals are more general than others. So, for example, if you look at the Journal of Algebra, obviously from the name, you know that it publishes paper about algebra. And there are journals that are more general journal. For example, say Transactions of the American Mathematical Society. So it's a general journal and it accepts different areas of mathematics. So the other aspect, as I said, besides the correct area, you look for the suitable difficulty. If you have a paper and you ideally you publish it in the journal that is as prestigious as possible and yet would accept the journal. Um, I guess it's comparable to if you're going to sell a car or a house, you will look for the highest bidder. And if you sell the house to someone who offers low price, you feel that, well, you could have done better. And if you ask for too high a price, the potential buyer might just walk away and buy the house from other people. So, I mean, by the same token, if you have a paper, if you submit it to a relatively lower journal, you might feel, well, could I have done better? Because if you publish in a more prestigious journal, you would get more academic credit as a result. But if you become too ambitious and you submit it to a very tough journal, you would get rejected. So if you get a rejected, this is where the analogy with selling a car ends, because if you have a car to sell, you ask for a very high price, the buyer says no, you might offer a second price, like, bargaining. But it's not how things work with mathematics journal. If you have a paper, you submit it to a very high level journal and you get rejected, then you have to resubmit again, and it takes time. It's much more time consuming than offering a second prize in a car sale. Often a paper review would take, say, half a year or 1 year. So it's not entirely advisable to just try from the very, very top journal if it's just not realistic, especially for young scholars who might have time pressure to get the works published because they want to lend themselves jobs in good places. So if the paper is submitted and then get rejected, then 1 year is gone. And also that's a risk that other people might have done similar works during this 1 year span. So choosing an ideal journal to submit, in fact, is a very delicate issue. So often an author, if the author has a paper which is, say, uh, 90 points, the author might try the luck, a journal of 95 points, and then if rejected, then go for 90, and then if rejected, go for 88 or something. But if the submission and rejection process goes too often, it just takes away the time, and often it can also be uh, frustrating to read so many rejection letters. And of course, on the other extreme, I have my own experience. Occasionally, if my paper is immediately accepted very quickly after just 3 months, it's a mixed feeling of joy and uncertainty. I mean, when I have a paper accepted in 3 months, I feel very happy. Okay, good, my paper is accepted. But then there's always deep down another voice asking, wow, could I have done better by submitting it to a higher journal? So it's sort of a tricky thing. Also depends on the mood and the time constraint. If I don't have too much time pressure, I would go more ambitiously to a higher ranking journal. Whereas for junior scholars in particular, if they do not publish papers for a while and there's some pressure to publish more papers, then the person might be tempted to submit it to a lower relative, everything is relative, a relatively lower ranked journal to get it published more quickly.
Okay, Professor. Let's say we submit an article to a journal publisher.
Yes.
Uh, what is the process of uh, that they go through that makes our paper legitimate or not? Like how do they go about doing it?
So usually after we submit it, the way it works is we either send the paper by in PDF file to the journal editor, or many journals, they do have the special websites that we can upload the PDF files of the paper in their websites, and within the next few days, say 3 days to 5 days, we would receive an acknowledgement saying that, okay, we have received the paper. I mean, just so that the author is certain that, okay, it has been received. And then the next thing is we just wait. And usually after the acknowledgement, I would hope that I do not hear from the journal within the next 1 month. If there's news from the next 1 month, it's almost certain to be bad news because my papers are never reviewed within 1 month. I mean, the fastest would be 3 months or 6 months. So the editor would look for anonymous reviewer to ask for a quick opinion just to save everybody's time. If the initial opinion is no good, then we receive very quick rejection. If after a very quick review saying that, okay, it deserves further consideration, then it will go on longer. Uh, for my case, some papers are accepted within 3 months, the fastest. The norm would be 6 months to 1 year. I'm speaking in mathematics, so I don't know about other disciplines. And usually after several months, we get two kinds of responses. One would be a rejection, too bad, then we submit again. One would be suggestion for revision. So the paper it's almost never accepted without any revision. So very often, if lucky, if we are in good case, the reviewer would say, okay, looks so far so good. However, we suggest the author to revise here and there and so on. So that is usually a good sign. And if that's the case, well, we just follow the referee report. I mean, the referee is whatever the referee says, I'll just follow because the acceptance of the paper is determined by the reviewer and sometimes the editor. And if there's no news after 6 months, sometimes we would gently send a message to the journal and ask for the progress the of the review process. Uh, First of all, most of the cases, the reviewer does not receive any um, financial benefit from reviewing the paper. So it's a voluntary process. So more than often, the reviewer, after getting the paper, would just put it, after reading it for the first day or two, would put it on the corner and then just happen to be busy elsewhere and just ignore it. And we sometimes gently remind the editor to inform the reviewer to sort of speed up the review process. Of course, we do it politely. We don't want to anger the editor and the reviewer. So that's how it goes. If after a while we do not hear from it, occasionally, well, it depends on case by case. We might hope that the reviewer feels guilty of dragging on for so long, and hopefully it would increase the chances of being accepted. So as I said, the quality of a paper, whether it's beautiful, whether it's nice, is a very subjective matter. So it's often just up to the reviewer to say yes or no, and yeah, that's how things work.
Okay, Professor, I'm also interested in knowing, you talk
Yes.
about reviewers of the journals, right? The journal
Yeah.
articles. Who are these people? Do these journal publishers have their own people reviewing the articles, or they send it out to universities? How does it work? Can you please explain that to us?
Yes, the editor would be the fixed people. I mean, every journal has a group of editors, and we know the editor by looking at the journal's website. We know who they are, so we submit it to either directly to the article or upload it at the website, and then the editor would find anonymous reviewers to do the reviewing process. And so from anybody in the world that the editor feels is suitable to review the paper. So I myself several times was contacted by some editors to review other people's paper. So it's done anonymously, so that of course the author would not know who the reviewer is, and
Okay,
the
Professor.
editor would. I mean, different editors would work differently. I mean, I would guess that many editors would look from the list of uh, references at the end of the paper, and it's part of the way to find relevant reviewers. Yeah, I mean, if the paper cites the work of somebody else, then that somebody else is likely to be an eligible, a suitable reviewer. But of course, it doesn't always work that way. I mean, some editors might have other sources of knowledge on knowing who are the suitable reviewers. So it's done anonymously.
Okay. Okay, Professor. Now, thank you. That's a very clear explanation. But earlier you did mention about the about sending articles to quality journals and so on.
Yes,
Now,
yes,
if I were a writer, let's say, yeah, of a journal article, how
yes.
do I decide which is a quality journal, which is not?
Uh-huh. So in many areas of research, there's a number called impact factor. So impact factor is a number that indicates how frequent the articles in that journal uh, are cited, roughly speaking. So, if the papers that appear in the journal are cited very often, then the journal has a very high impact factor. So, impact factor uh, is a sometimes, I wouldn't say always, a reflection of how good the journal is, because if the journal publishes paper that are cited very often, then the journal is regarded more highly. And I wouldn't say it's an absolute measure of the quality of the journal, because in mathematics in particular, there are some uh, papers that are just very good and yet too hard to be understood, that people don't cite it as much, not just because it's a bad paper, but it's just too good and people cannot understand it as readily as a lower ranked paper. So it's not a very, I wouldn't call it an accurate measure. I mean, it's positively correlated in many cases. For example, in mathematics, the top journals are the Annals of Mathematics, published by Princeton, as well as the Journal of the American Mathematical Society, and there's a third one, Invenciones Mathematicae, published by Springer Verlag, and these have very high impact factors. However, there are also relatively mediocre journals that have similarly high impact factors. So it's not always correct to go by impact factors. I know that in other aspects of experimental science, the impact factor is relatively more accurate. In mathematics, it's a good source of reference, but not absolute. Another way to understand the quality of a journal is we just look at the editorial board and also the papers that already appear in that journal. I mean, if the editorial board is very intimidating, with editors coming from the very, very top places and top experts, I would know that it's a very, very strong journals. I mean, those people would not accept paper too easily. And also, as I said, another way to judge is to look at the papers that already appear there. I mean, if the papers that appear there are very top papers, very tough papers, then it's not likely to suddenly accept a lower ranked papers. Um, we can also have a rough guess about how serious the journal in evaluating the papers. I mean, many papers, when they're published, that's the date located in the front page, date received and date revised and date published. So to have a rough guess of how long the review process often takes, that's a small indication. So there's no absolute answer to your question, but it's more like a combination of a few factors, including impact factors, the strength of the editorial board, and the quality of the papers there. And also by submitting paper to these journals after a few years, I sort of have a rough feeling of which are tougher and which are easier.
Okay, Professor, thank you for that response here. Now, I've heard of cases where people can pay money and get their journal articles published. You
Uh-huh.
know, uh, what's your opinion on this? Is it legitimate to do that? Like you just simply pay money and then your article gets published?
Well, it's legal, except that it does not the result does not carry academic merit. So in the past few years, there's this thing called the Predatory Journal. Um, so I mean the traditional journals get their income from library subscription, and the predatory journals, they would get the income from the authors themselves. They would tell the authors that, okay, for your paper, you pay us article processing charges and we send it to reviewers, and if it's published, then you pay us the processing charge. And these are called open access in the sense that the readers can read it directly from the website, because the journals do not collect money from libraries. It's not by library university subscription, so it's freely accessible in the web. I should quickly add that in other aspects of research, there could be good open access or journals that accepts article processing charges. I mean, I shouldn't say that it works in every area, so I can only speak for mathematics. So in mathematics, most of the very good journals do not charge. I would say many, I shouldn't say, yeah, article processing charges. And there are quite a few predatory journals that once they get the money, they just publish the paper with very mild peer review, even if the paper is poorly written. I mean, it's legal, except that, I mean, if you have a paper published in those predatory journals, I mean, it does not carry much academic credit. And this is a result of the fact that more and more universities are pressuring the faculty members to publish more quickly. I don't know if it's a good sign, but it urges people who are under time pressure to quickly publish their papers in predatory journals by just paying money to the journals. And it's certainly not a very good sign. And when I read my emails every day, I have tons of advertisements from these predatory journals, which ask me to submit papers to them and get published for a fee. And so this is certainly not good. The papers would have lower quality, and I think um, to face this issue, we would need the university to have a more a better system of reviewing performances, so that the mediocre or the bad papers which are published at these journals are not given as high academic credit as the better papers that appear in top journals. So, I mean, in research, quality is much more important than quantity. So, for my rate of publication, I mean, I've been working for uh, 28 years and I published like 38 papers. So my rate of publication is like 1 or 2 papers per year. Whether this is fast or not fast, it depends on the area. But I mean, if I want to quickly publish more papers, like 1 paper per month, I mean, I could have paid money to the predatory journals and published 10 papers or 12 papers a year. And it it's just silly because it doesn't mean much to have a high number of publication with mediocre results, and that's not good. So in the academic world, quality is more important than quantity.
Quantity.
So yeah, it's just like, when you want to buy durian, one Musang King costs a lot more than several kampong durians. So, obviously quality is a lot more important. Yeah. So that's all I can say. Yeah, I've been talking a lot about food, durian and
Yeah,
rendang and mi udang. So our next program will have Penang food.
your analogies work, all right?
I miss Penang food, yes.
Your analogies work to prove a point. So that's good. Hey,
Uh-huh.
Professor, one more thing I want to ask you is that, you're talking about these predatory journals, right?
Yes.
How rampant it is in today's society. I mean, are they like minority or a majority? Can you comment on that, please?
I guess I just ignore them. I mean, if I publish in predatory journals, first of all, I have to pay for them. And secondly, at least for myself, it's not going to bring any good to me. I mean, I can add more, I can have a longer list of publication in my CV, but it's not going to bring me any other benefit. I mean, my university is not going to say, okay, good, you have 2 more papers and I'm going to give you more money. It's not going to work that way. So for me, I mean, it doesn't work. So I don't know, in possibly some places in the corner of the world where the university, if there's no efficient um, peer review system or the performance review system, and they just look at the list of application regardless of the quality, then it could just encourage people to do that. I mean, to just invest the money, pay it to the journal, and then um, get the job secure and find a job because the employer is deceived by a long list of publication. I don't know how it works elsewhere. So yeah, but I do indeed receive solicitation for publication every day, those junk mails saying that if you publish, well, they wouldn't say that they publish it for a fee. They would say that, okay, if you submit your paper, we'll have the review result in 10 days, and then the article processing fee would be how many US dollars per page, and so on. And right then, I immediately know that it's not a very proper journals because a good paper is not reviewed in 10 days or even 2 or 3 weeks.
Okay, Professor, thank you very much. Now, what you've shared with us today is like the behind the scenes of journal articles and publication and all that. And I think that many of us are not aware of this. And I really appreciate that you have consented to sharing this information with us. And I think it'll be very helpful to a lot of us here, especially the young ones, who are starting their career and so on. So this will be very good for them. Uh, okay, Professor, we have an audience here in case you were
Yes.
wondering a bit. So now invite the audience to ask any questions if they have.
Yes, sure. How to encourage more involving in writing and publishing articles at international journals? How to encourage more uh, writing and publishing articles at international journals? Well, we would have good motivation. So if the university and the government has uh, provided good incentives such as salary increase or research funding that allows the researcher to travel both nationally and abroad, and also provide awards that would make the scholars more motivated, and also to have healthy um, evaluation on the performance so that good works are rewarded more highly, and it's are more highly regarded. So I would think the environment is very important to cultivate new scholars.
Okay, Professor, thank you. Now, members of the audience, if you have any questions to ask Professor Chua, you should
Yes,
just type it down, and Dr. Matt will post it here, and our
yes.
professor will be able to answer the questions. Yeah.
Uh-huh. So I see a question: how to write and avoid plagiarism traps. So I don't know which plagiarism traps you're referring. I mean, there are two possible scenarios that an honest author writes something which the author thinks is new, but accidentally repeats others' work. Or the word trap would seem to indicate that the result is being plagiarized by others. So for me, if I write something or I have a new idea, first of all, if I write something based on my own work, say my work that's published 2 years ago has done this and that. And the next step is to do something stronger or more general than it. Then I'm quite safe that I'm not repeating others people's work. Or if I see an old paper, say if I come across a paper in the year 2000, it's like over 20 years, and I think, okay, these papers seem to give me an inspiration for me to think and work something else. But of course, I mean, there's the risk that the continuation has been done in 5 years ago and so on. So if I come across a paper which is relatively old and then I feel that I can solve a consequence of it, I would use the internet. Um, you can Google search, or in mathematics that's this thing called the MathSciNet. It's sponsored by the American Mathematical Society, AMS, American Mathematical Society, that you can key in some keywords and immediately it will show you the works that appears in recent times. And if you see that the keyword does not ring any bell, then you feel safe that it's not uh, done by others.
Other people.
And the other aspect uh, is that if I write something, then would it be plagiarized? Well, when the work is done, I would submit it to a journal. So, and if the journal publishes it, then it's my credit. So that would be one way. Uh-huh.
Professor, for your information, in Malaysia,
Yes.
the local universities, like University Science Malaysia, University Malaysia, University Kebangsaan, all those universities, they make it compulsory for the students to go through this plagiarism check, and they have an
Ah,
application, and you have to submit your entire dissertation into that, and then it'll give you a score. And when you get the score, it must be below a certain percentage for you to pass. If it's above a certain percentage, that means there's a lot of plagiarism in there, and your thesis will be rejected.
Yes,
That's how they do it. And even at our IPG, we get our students to go through the plagiarism check, so we can see, because that application can like detect where they plagiarize it from, and then it'll give you a percentage. So it must be like 30% and below, then okay. If not, it's not okay. Because of course you have like quotations, right? Direct quotations. That cannot be considered as plagiarism because they are
yes, yes,
direct
yes.
quotations. Yeah.
Yes,
I'm an English literature person, yeah. So I'm talking from my point of view. You're a maths guy. So I don't know how it works with the maths people.
yes. Thank you, Dr. Hussein, for uh, adding this comment. I agree. I forgot to mention the plagiarism check. So if the paper goes through the plagiarism uh, software or something, there will be a score indicating whether it's too resembling to another past paper. Yes, indeed. So that's this thing. So personally, as an author, I know I don't plagiarize, so I'm not familiar with how that software goes. So I just submitted. Indeed, yes, that's a very good point to answer. Yes, thank you.
Thank, thank you, Professor. Okay, Professor, looks like we don't have any questions from the audience because
Yes,
Dr. Matt said that if he has questions, he'll post it here and then you get to answer it. So I guess this brings our discussion to a close.
yes.
And I sincerely thank you for sharing the behind the scenes, happenings
Mhm.
of what happens when we submit an article. And I think a lot of us are not aware of this. We just submit articles. We don't know where we submit to. We don't know what predatory journals are. Yeah. So I really thank you for creating this awareness among us. And I really appreciate your talk. Yeah. And if you come to Penang, come and get in touch with us. We'll take you out to eat.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Mat, Dr. Hussein, for hosting today's event and moderating this event. It's I feel very happy to
Yeah, it
get
was
in
good.
touch with
Very good.
Penang. Yes, yes, yes. So it's my great pleasure to participate in this
Yeah.
event. And yes, thank you, IPG. Thank you, Dr. Koo, Dr. Mat, Dr. Hussein. And yeah, I really appreciate the chance to share my experience with you. Yeah, thank you, Director Dr. Asman, and also, of course, last but not least, all the audience who watch this program. And yes, thank you very much.
Hey, Professor Shua, I should thank you for sharing, your knowledge with us, because I think there are a lot of things I've learned today,
Aha.
about the process of the publication of journals and predatory journals and all these things. So it's been very beneficial to all of us, me as well as whoever has been watching this. I don't know who's watching it. So it's been really good. So thank you very much and
Thank
all the
you.
best. Yeah. Take
Yep.
care.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye
Bye bye.
bye.
Bye bye.